These individuals commit multiple murders over a period, often with distinct patterns and methods. But did you know that not all serial killers are the same? In fact, researchers have identified different types of serial killers based on their motivations, behaviors, and personalities. Peter Vronsky, a renowned author and criminologist, has identified 4 main types of serial killers. The visionary killer.
The visionary killer is often plagued by delusions or hallucinations, which they believe are messages from a higher power. These messages may instruct them to kill a specific type of person or carry out a particular ritual. The visionary killer believes that their actions are justified and necessary to carry out the divine plan. Visionary killers often display symptoms of mental illness such as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. They may also have a history of drug abuse, which can further exacerbate their delusions and lead to violent behavior. The delusions experienced by visionary killers can be incredibly powerful and convincing. To them, the voice or message they hear is real and cannot be ignored. The killer may become fixated on a particular group of people or idea, believing that their actions will somehow bring about a greater good or fulfill a higher purpose. In some cases, the killer may believe they are carrying out the will of God, while in others they may feel they are possessed by a demon or other supernatural entity. These beliefs can become so all-consuming that the killer becomes detached from reality, and their actions are solely driven by their delusions. One of the most infamous visionary killers in recent history is David Berkowitz, also known as the Son of Sam. Berkowitz believed that a demon-possessed dog instructed him to kill, and that the murders he committed were part of a larger plan to stop the devil from taking over the world. However, during an interview while he was in prison 1979 with the FBI, David Berkowitz admitted to making it up so he could plead insanity to the court. In the interview, David Berkowitz explained to the FBI that the real reason he killed was because he felt resentment towards his mother and other women that had rejected him in the past. David Berkowitz does maintain to this day that the demon dog made him do it. Another example of a visionary killer is Charles Manson. Charles Manson is considered a visionary killer. He formed his own cult, the Manson family, and believed that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. Manson was convinced that a race war was imminent and believed that his actions, including the infamous Tate LaBianca murders, would help bring about this war. He saw his killings as part of a larger plan to ignite a race war, and he convinced his followers that his actions were necessary to achieve this goal. Manson's belief system and the way he convinced others to follow him set him apart as a visionary killer.
The mission-oriented killer.
Mission-oriented killers are driven by a specific goal or cause, often related to a belief or ideology. They may see themselves as soldiers or crusaders, fighting for a greater good. They may also see their actions as a way to punish those they believe have wronged them, or society as a whole. Unlike other types of killers, mission-oriented killers often do not have a specific victim type. Instead, their victims are chosen because they are seen as obstacles or enemies to their cause. Ted Kaczynski, also known as the Unabomber, is a notorious mission-oriented killer. Kaczynski was a former mathematics professor who became a recluse and began sending bombs through the mail to people he believed were promoting technological progress. Kaczynski saw technology as a threat to human freedom and believed that his bombings were necessary to bring about a revolution against technology. John Wayne Gacy, also known as the Killer Clown, was a mission-oriented killer who believed that he was helping young men by providing them with employment and shelter. However, Gacy also sexually assaulted and murdered over 30 young men, burying their bodies in his crawl space. Gacy believed that his victims were expendable and that his mission to provide for young men justified his actions. Gary Ridgway, also known as the Green River Killer, was a mission-oriented killer who believed that he was ridding the world of prostitutes. Ridgway targeted women who he saw as immoral or deserving of punishment, and he believed that his actions were helping to cleanse society of vice.
The hedonistic killer.
Hedonistic killers are driven by pleasure, and they often derive sexual gratification or other forms of enjoyment from their crimes. They may take pleasure in the act of killing itself, or in the suffering of their victims. Unlike other types of killers, hedonistic killers may not have a specific motive for their crimes, beyond the pleasure they derive from them. Hedonistic killers are driven by pleasure, and they often derive sexual gratification or other forms of enjoyment from their crimes. They may take pleasure in the act of killing itself, or in the suffering of their victims. Unlike other types of killers, hedonistic killers may not have a specific motive for their crimes, beyond the pleasure they derive from them. Ted Bundy is perhaps one of the most infamous hedonistic killers. Bundy was a charming and intelligent man who lured young women to their deaths, often by pretending to be injured or in need of assistance. Bundy was known for his good looks and charisma, and he used these qualities to disarm his victims and gain their trust. He derived pleasure from the act of killing, and often engaged in necrophilia with his victims' bodies. Edmund Kemper, also known as the co-ed killer, was a brutal hedonistic killer who killed 10 people, including his own mother. Kemper was over 6 feet tall and weighed over 300 pounds, making him a physically imposing figure. He often picked up young female hitchhikers and took them back to his home, where he tortured and killed them. Kemper derived pleasure from the power he had over his victims and enjoyed manipulating and controlling them before their deaths.
The power/control-oriented killer.
Power or control-oriented killers are driven by a need for power and control over their victims. They often plan their crimes carefully, selecting victims they perceive as weak or vulnerable. They may also engage in other forms of abuse, such as torture or to assert their dominance. The act of killing is often secondary to the feeling of control the killer experiences during the crime. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, terrorized Wichita, Kansas, for over 3 decades. Rader derived pleasure from the power he had over his victims and taunted the media and police with cryptic messages and letters. He enjoyed breaking into his victims' homes, rearranging their belongings, and taking personal items as souvenirs. Rader carefully planned his crimes and would stalk his victims for weeks or months before making his move. His sense of control extended beyond the murder itself, as he relished the media attention and enjoyed the fear he caused in the community. Jeffrey Dahmer, on the other hand, was a cannibalistic serial killer who targeted young men and boys in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He too derived pleasure from the power he had over his victims, but his motivation was more complex than that of Rader. Dahmer was socially isolated and struggled with deep-seated feelings of inadequacy. He sought to exert control over his victims in order to feel a sense of power and companionship. He would lure young men to his apartment, where he would drug them and then kill them. He would often dismember their bodies, preserving body parts as trophies.
Serial killers can be grouped into 4 distinct types based on their motivations and behaviors. While everyone is unique, understanding these categories can help us better understand the twisted minds of these dangerous criminals.